Okay, so as I recall, we were just about to finish the Mad Lib. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that where we were?
Oh,
Yes.
install Visual Studio after 2012 Express. It works.
Before.
What?
So you say install Visual Studio after 2012 Express.
I said do it before.
You say install Visual Studio before 2012 Express.
Because like you have all your
doesn't matter.
you have all your visual static website. The thing is when you do the afterwards that you can integrate it easier with Visual Studio.
I install my SQL Server after.
Yeah, I think
I don't know why it would work.
Basically, if the computer gods smile upon you.
Yeah.
And they're still frowning upon me.
So you attach an MDF as your database, does it matter what you install afterwards?
Well, so you need to have Express installed.
Yeah.
Some version of Express. Okay, so the way that it is supposed to work and that it works for me
Works on my
is
machine.
if you have a newer version of SQL Express, you can open any database created with any older version of SQL Express. But it's not the opposite. So let's say I have 2008 on my computer, and you come to me, Ben, with your flash drive on which there's an MDF database that you created using 2012. When I go to open that in Visual Studio, I'll get this nasty error saying this version, or this database was created with version 661 or something. The database supports only versions up to 655 or something like that. And some of you have seen that. So my goal this semester was to move us all to 2012, so that we would all be using the most recent version of SQL Express, and we wouldn't have any of these issues. Apparently, that hasn't been the case.
My issue is when I go to open the MDF, it says it doesn't support anything newer than SQL 2008.
How many of you had 2008 R2 installed before you installed 2012? And you had no problem whatsoever?
Yeah, Marlo had some problems.
Oh, okay.
I uninstalled it and then
You
just,
uninstalled 20?
right, because I had the full
2008
2008, so I uninstalled that and installed the Express.
And it works
It
fine.
seems that 2008 is the problem, being installed.
Yeah, I mean, you can run parallel full version and Express version, but maybe there's some hiccup in there that something's not happening.
Did you rename your local instance? Because I installed 2012, and I think you said it looked like I had the full version on, but I gave it a different instance so that it's not local.
Yeah, I tried renaming everything.
So if you're running into problems with that, and you still haven't solved it.
I've fixed my
You fixed
problem.
it,
I
okay.
installed
I might have
just
to come talk to you.
2012 and just.
Okay, okay, so come see me, we can try to work through it. We may have to just uninstall everything and start fresh, because what I found with someone, I don't remember what it was, who it was. So there was somebody who, this one is. Oh yeah, that was it. Okay, so that's the full version. There it is. Okay. So if you go here, one of you downloaded this. It's not the right one. It needs to be this.
The bottom.
Either the bottom one, or the top one, or even this one. But you don't want the local DB. So this is when you embed SQL Server Express in an application, like a Windows application. Okay, so if you downloaded this version, that may be where your issue lies. Really, all you need is this version, database engine, because you can use Visual Studio as the front end. But if you want to get Management Studio Express, and you'd rather work in that environment, then you can download the database engine.
But that mixed bottom one, I think that's the one I did.
Yeah, that one should be fine. The Database Engine Express tools and reporting services and full text search, that should be fine.
But I don't,
Yours is working, right?
yeah, but once you're in SSMS, how do you open the MDF file?
You should be able to go to the open.
Yeah, I never could get that to work.
I'll have to look at it.
Okay.
Okay, so coming back here to the calendar, so today we're going to launch into data controls after we finish our state. We have a reprieve on Thursday. There's no class on Thursday, so we can use that time to catch up. And then we'll spend the 23rd also on data controls. And then on the 25th, we'll talk about CSS themes and skins. This is a light topic, so it should be a bit of a break. And then on the 30th, we just got this synthesis day, which is just kind of a day to absorb a little bit. I've got in here Balloon Shop with the idea of showing you some things in the Balloon Shop application, the demo application, how they pull everything together, okay, that we've learned so far. We don't necessarily have to do that. We can just leave it as a day for working on projects or whatever, catching up on repository. So I'll just come and we'll let you guys be together.
Have to do the day before that?
Yeah, let's change that.
Okay.
So we'll make it do that now. So that way we can kind of absorb things. Okay. You guys are all stressed out.
Yes.
We haven't tested.
We just know how much is left on our exams.
That exam is so killer.
That exam, almost everything on that exam you've done in the repository. Almost every single thing.
I can't find some of the stuff.
The master page question, that's exactly what you did, right? Reaching into the master page change. The user control question, exactly what you did. The point of the exam is to drive home these concepts, and you've done it before. You've done it before, you just don't realize you've done it before. Or some of you, in fact, haven't done it because you didn't finish the repository. But really, guys, if you did the repository, you really have the ingredients that you need, minus a couple of questions. Number six, the one where you have the label in the text box and it asks you why doesn't the label update for the text box.
That was a cool
I
problem.
got
That is a
one.
cool problem,
I got
but
that one done though.
that trips up a lot of students, but you only have to change one word in your code behind file. One word.
And if you come up with alternative solutions,
Oh,
that's
what
cool
if
too.
What if you did something else?
Yeah, you can do something else, but you can't tamper with that button one click, right? The question said you can't alter that at all. So as long as there could be other solutions, but as long as you obey the rules of the question. So my point is, guys, I didn't design the exam to torture you. It really is a repeat of what we've done in the repository to solidify the concepts in your mind. But if you don't recognize that, I understand how it can be difficult. Yes?
My main problem is a time constraint. I'm sure I could figure it all out if I had time to finish the thing.
Yeah.
But we haven't had any time in class, and I haven't had much time outside of
Too
class.
many concerts, Kristen. Just kidding.
I wish. That'd be awesome.
Well, what can I say? A question, you had a week, which is, for the 50-50 students, a question and a half per day. Doesn't seem too unreasonable to me. But I understand. It is a time crunch. All right. Should we dive into state? Let's go. Okay, so we were at the point of just creating the Madlib, right?
State of confusion. on which page, the MATLAB 3?
Yeah, did we finish MATLAB 3? I think we did. I didn't fill out all my verbs, right?
Oh,
So
we're gonna change.
If you recall, MATLAB 3 grabbed all the adjectives from MATLAB 2 and put them in the session. Okay? And then MATLAB 3 needs to get all the verbs that are on its own page, right? And pass them to MATLAB Final in a cookie. So we created a cookie, and you see the constructor for the HTTP cookie class requires a name for the cookie, so we gave it the name verbs. And then we create a series of key value pairs. So conceptually, the cookie looks like this. Okay, so it's a text file. It's called verbs. And then it has a series of key value pairs. Verb 1, something. Verb 2, something else, and so on and so forth. Okay? Yes?
How long does this session persist?
That's a good question. The default is 20 minutes.
Okay.
That's 20 minutes without any activity. You can change that, and your book explains how to set the settings in the web config file.
Okay, so it's just something that you go in and, is it like a default setting in the web config and you go in and change that?
Well, yeah, so there is a default setting. You won't see it in your web config file. It's in another file called machine.config, which is a global configuration file. But you can add your own overrides for that in web config. Okay, so we need to continue this for our other verbs. How many were there? 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Extra ones. Okay, so once we've added all of our verbs from the text boxes into the cookie, we can simply add the cookie to the response object, right? Remember, we're programming on the server. So, client, server, okay? So the server sends responses to the client, and the client sends requests to the server. So up here, we use the request object to get the value of the query string, okay? And now we're using the response object to attach a cookie that will be sent back to the client.
You have to make another request to get that back, really.
What do you mean? Make another request?
The response to add the cookie, so that's a response coming back from the server to the
Nope.
client.
That's correct, and we're programming here, right? This is us.
Okay.
This is us. So when the browser sent from MATLAB 2, sent the request to MATLAB 3, it contained all those query string arguments, right? So we retrieve those from the request. Now we're sending a response to the client with the cookie attached.
Sorry, I was looking at it the other way.
Yeah. Well, we're used to working here on the client, so this is a bit of a mind shift now. Okay, so we add the cookie and we redirect to MATLAB Final. Now on MATLAB Final, I gave you all the code. Do we need to tweak any names though? So notice here on MATLAB Final, Blaine. Now what are we doing? So remember, the cookie gets sent to MATLAB to the client with the response.redirect to MATLAB Final. Now once we're on MATLAB Final, we retrieve the cookie again from the request.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just looking at it from the wrong angle.
Yeah, so we request the cookie, we get the cookie called verbs from the request object. If it's not null, what do? We simply pull out all those values. Okay? And then we need to get the nouns and the adjectives from the session. Remember, we've stored those in the session on previous pages? So we need to pull them out, but remember, whenever we put something in the session, what is it stored as? Not a string, an object. a generic object, which is actually extremely powerful because it means we can put anything we want in the session. And later on, I'll show you guys an example of us using a session to keep track of the shopping cart. So we can put a whole shopping cart object in it. But the implication is when we pull something back out of the session, we need to convert it or cast it to the type that we want it to be. Okay? Which is why we have to call the toString method here for all these, because we're trying to stick it in the textable label. Yes? Okay? Same thing here. Okay, so I think that's it. Did I go back, did I do all the adjectives in mine? It seems like I skipped something.
I think it was just that verb part.
Yeah, I did all the adjectives, did all the nouns. So yeah, that should go. So we'll say method 3, and we'll go back and start at method 1. Okay, come on, shout them out, guys.
Dogs.
Cats.
Cars.
Car, you have to be singular now.
Oh, car, sorry.
Computer.
Beef.
Mouse.
Hippo, house, what?
Mouse.
Mouse? House. One more.
Hi.
Hi. Adjectives. 4 of them.
Beautiful.
You guys are like, I should have paid more attention to English. What is an adjective?
Ethically.
Red.
I thought you were asking for keywords, not adjectives.
Bloody.
What was that, Kristen?
Ethically.
Yeah, epically would be an
That's
adverb.
Bloody.
Epic would be
a
an adjective.
brain.
Bloody. All right. Now, what's the difference between a transitive and an intransitive verb?
Oh my gosh.
Transitive verb takes a direct object, right? Kick. I'm going to be the voice for you guys. Kick, shout, punch. You guys are feeling tense soon. Intransitive.
Intransitive.
Fly.
Stir.
Open.
Eat.
Stir. Eat. Jump would be intransitive.
Drive.
Create. Okay. Free the dogs of the United States. In order to kick more beautiful cat, shout car, punch red computer, fly for the epic beef. Open the bloody hippo. And stir the blessings of mouse to ourselves in our house. Do we even create this tie for the United States of America? Very good.
Wow. I missed something.
Okay, did it work?
Mine won't take the adjectives from the session.
It won't take the adjectives from the session. So make sure that these names, little ADJ1, match what's in Madlib 2 here.
I've already sent them.
In the second page. Who did it work for? I'm just curious. Most of us?
No.
No? What's wrong? What's going wrong?
Session noun 1. It's a Madlib 2.
Remember, these things will be case sensitive. So if you named it session capital noun 1, that better be what you're trying to pull it out of
On the final.
in Madlib final.
Yeah.
Mine says system web HTTP cookie does not contain a constructor that takes signature.
Yeah, so you don't have a name in your cookie. So I'm at with 3. Okay. So what that's saying is there's no such constructor for HTTP cookie that has no arguments. And I think that was a mistake I made last time and corrected at the very end. Others, are you finding success tracking down your mistakes?
Could you go back to 2 for a moment? Thank you.
Where's Madeline? Can you see Madeline too? No, you're getting a no reference exception, which means you're gonna have
Oh, please educate. Well,
Yeah, it's always in there. I may have to look at that afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, that's just weird. We did it last week.
Hey,
Yes,
does your start over button work?
it should. Oh, maybe not.
okay, yeah, it's on the same page.
Ours doesn't.
This
Ours
session.
doesn't. It
Why not?
says, it says abandon the session and then redirect to Matt.
Who can tell me why that button does not work? What is, apparently the abandon button doesn't work. Start again. Nope, you're right, it doesn't work. Why not? Who said that? Ben. I'll try to get out of it, Ben.
Oh, we don't have it on.
What's missing?
We don't have an event. On page. No, we don't.
There's an event handler method.
But there's
Right.
no on click. Yeah, there's no on click.
There's no, so this is here, but there's no on click here that links that event to. So what do we need to do?
On click.
Yeah, so you can either do it here or you can go to design view. Here's the button. Look at its methods and choose. Let's start over real quick.
Oh. No, I heard this was
Did you fix that?
Spencer, try shutting down the whole thing and just
I actually
rerunning it
fixed
from the
that
beginning.
because I had a space in my query.string.
A space. Yeah. Yeah. That would do it.
You just redirecting that button to the first page then?
Yep, so the Start Again button, what does it do? It,
It's redirect.
session abandoned, which what does that do?
It clears your session.
It clears the session out. So remember, the session is actually being managed with a cookie. Okay, now we don't interact directly with that cookie, but what happens is that the cookie has a session ID in it, which is a global unique identifying code. And so this cookie, the server creates this cookie with the session ID and gives it to the client. And then every subsequent request and response, that cookie gets passed. That session ID gets passed, okay? So when we say session abandoned, we're basically killing that cookie, okay? So no more will that cookie be passed, and therefore the session effectively goes away.
What's the expiration on that cookie?
Default is 20 minutes.
Okay.
Was it that same cookie that we posted the verbs to?
No, two different cookies. So that verb cookie was our own cookie that we built by hand.
So when we abandon the session, will the verb cookies still be there?
It will still be there.
So like, if we go back through it, will what we do overwrite what was done previously
Yes.
then? Okay.
Yes, it will create a new cookie called verbs that will override the old cookie called verbs. Yep. Now, your book explains how you can actually manually, you don't really delete the cookie. What you do is you set its expiration date to some time in the past. Okay? So you can set the expiration date of the cookie to some point in the past, which will effectively null the cookie. I mean, and your book shows you code for that. Okay.
Does yours, when you run the web browser,
Actually do the what?
it doesn't actually do the redirect?
It should now, yeah. I'll have to refresh.
What did we need to change on that button?
So what were we missing on the button? We had the method, the event handler method there. But we were missing in the content file this piece. So without this piece, there's nothing to link the click event to this event handler method, right? So nothing happens.
If we created this, we actually set up in the form, dragged that down there,
And
and
then-
then had that already, would it?
And then, so you would have dragged the button on, you would have double clicked on the button, or in its event, and it would have added this.
Okay, that makes
It
sense.
would have added this. But a common mistake that a lot of students and me too make, when you actually either already have the event handler method given to you, or you type it in manually, it's easy to forget to come back and put this in, which is the thing that links the event to the method. Okay? Make sense? Any more questions on this?
Still got a,
Okay, let's shift gears now and talk just a little bit about the data controls. And we probably won't get even halfway through this today. But I at least want to introduce you to what these things are. This is really, the data controls we're going to learn about over the next week are really the most powerful controls that we will deal with, and the most useful for your projects. Okay? We've already seen one. Do you remember when we did the author manager page? And we put a SQL data source on there. Do you remember we used one of these data controls? Let's find it here. Author, data binding, author manager, SQL data source. So this guy right here, remember him? Remember what that was? details view. Okay? So there are several different controls that ASP.NET offers for displaying data out of a database, or really from any source, but mostly out of a database. And it's useful to kind of categorize these controls into their respective capabilities, what they're for. Okay? You can think about this as it's kind of a 4-quadrant layout. Okay. The first criteria is single record versus multiple records. Okay. So is your goal to display a single record of data, meaning like a single row of data in the database? Or do you want to display a set of records, multiple rows in the database? Okay. In this example, in this page right here, what are we doing? Just so I'm sure you understand what I mean by this. It's a single record. In other words, a single author, yes? Single author, okay? The other dimension on which we can categorize these is table-driven versus template-driven. Okay? And you won't find this exact breakdown in your book, but I think this is just a useful way of kind of conceptualizing these. Move that over a little bit. Okay, so what goes in each quadrant? Table-driven, and by the way, what do I mean by table-driven? What I mean by that is the structure of this data control, the way it displays on the page, is you're kind of locked into a table format, rows and columns, okay? Versus template-driven. Template-driven means that you can use a template to set up the way this thing looks any way you want. Any way you want. So you can customize it. Okay? So table-driven single record is the details view, which is this guy, right? Do you see why this fits in here? What does this thing look like? It's a table, right? And that's pretty much what you're stuck with. You can change what's in each cell, but you can't really modify the overall layout of the details view. You're going to get it in a table, and that's the way it's designed. Okay? So if you're happy with this tabular layout, then this is a great choice. It's a great choice. If you're not, what can you use for single record and template driven, which gives you more flexibility? This is what we call the form view. Okay, form view goes here, and we'll see an example. What about multiple records? So you want to display more than one row at a time. Multiple records table driven is the grid view. Okay, and the grid view is really the workhorse of all these. Okay, and one that you'll probably rely on quite a bit. The grid view control. Multiple records template driven. The list view. And I'm going to put a couple more in here. Kill myself on this chair. Data list, and the repeater. Okay, I'm going to put those as subpoints under here. The list view can really do everything that the data list and the repeater can, and more. The list view is a new control as of the 4.0 release of the .NET framework. So before it was just these two here, but now the list view has kind of superseded those, but these are still available to you if you want to use them. But again, the list view does everything that the others do. Okay? So this is kind of a general framework for how do you choose which control is appropriate. Okay? For example, which control would you use to kind of do a catalog page on an e-commerce website where you want to display multiple product categories? Okay, so I'm hearing grid view and I'm hearing list view. So you're right on the multiple records. Why have multiple records?
You have multiple records that you're showing.
Yeah, you want to show, say, multiple categories, right? So if you're operating a scuba dive shop, you want to show fins and masks and wetsuits and this and that. So you have all the different categories. So grid view versus list view. Yeah, it kind of depends on how you want it to look, right? What if you want it to look similar to something that, you know, Amazon has? Let's see what theirs looks like. So if you go into, you know, some category here, you know, maybe I'll have to, let's go into home and garden tools here, kitchen and dining. Okay, so what if you want kind of something that looks like this? What would be the best choice? The list view actually would be the best choice. Now some of you are saying, well, this looks like a table though. And it kind of does, but with a grid view, as we'll see, you're kind of locked into the structure where each row is a record. So for example, small appliances here would be in this row. And then tools and gadgets would be in the next row, and so on, which really isn't the way that this is laid out, right? So the list view would be a more appropriate choice if you want to achieve something that looks like this. Okay. Now, if you want to display like weather data, atmospheric data for, you know, a set of days, the grid view might be a great choice for that because it's kind of tabular data. Okay, so different choices based on what your needs are. Any questions on that? How to think about these things? Okay, so let's just start. We'll ease into this a little bit. On this data controls exercise. Now, this exercise is probably the most intense exercise of the whole bunch. Okay. There's a lot of steps involved, so we'll spend as much time as we need to get through this together. Okay, so what we're going to do, starting on step 1, download the starting files from this exercise, create a subdirectory named images within the directory. Okay, so let's create the directory called data controls. Folder. Data controls, and within that directory we're going to create a subdirectory called images. And then we'll go grab the starting files from Canvas. Okay, so we won't actually need this until part 2, but we'll just go ahead and download it. So you'll see there's a whole bunch of images in here. Okay, these are actually images that I've stolen from the Balloon Shop application. We're just going to use them for part 2 of this exercise. So we'll go ahead and add those to the images directory. So add existing item. If you'd rather just drag them in, you can. It might be easier. I've got all these images in here. Okay, so now back to the instructions. It says, create a new ASPX page called authortitles.aspx in the directory created for this exercise. Okay? So, data controls, add new item. Authortitles.aspx. This page will display all authors in the pubs database and allow for inserting, editing, deleting author information. It will also allow the user to select an author and view and edit the titles associated with that author. Okay, so do you see where we're going? We're going to show all the authors. The user can select an author and see what titles that person has authored. This will be accomplished through the use of 2 grid view controls and 1 detailed view control. Okay, so add the following. A level 1 HTML header with the text authors. Source view here. A grid view called GVW authors. Okay, so we'll scroll below our header and we'll grab a grid view out of the data section of the toolbox. Grid view. And you can see that code for the grid view is quite simple. Okay, it just has an ID and a runout server like most controls. Design view shows you kind of, once again, this boilerplate tabular layout. Okay. Okay, this grid view should show all author information for all authors in the database, blah, blah, blah. The grid view should support editing, selecting, paging, and sorting. Bind the grid view to a SQL data source that performs the appropriate select, update, insert, delete operations. Okay, so let's create a SQL data source that will act as the data source for this grid view. So we'll go back, I'm going to work in source view here, and drag on a SQL data source. Does it matter where you put the SQL data source? Doesn't matter, it's now rendered to the page in the end. So you can put it wherever you want. So here it is, simple code. ID, runout server, that's all there is. Back to design view. We need to configure this SQL data source to do what we need it to do. What do we need it to do?
Turn on everything from authors.
Everything from authors, right? So, we'll go through the wizard, choose our pubs connection string. Next. If you get stuck, let me know. Choose your data connection, configure the select statement. So we can either do a custom statement. Do we need to do a custom statement in this case? No. Simple select star, right, from authors. What else do we need? Any where clauses involved here?
We're just returning everything, aren't we?
We're just getting all the authors. So no where clause needed.
Were we ordering?
You could order by if you want. By default, you'll get it ordered by author ID. Okay. So if you want to order by, you can. But we do need update, insert, delete, right? So we click advanced, generate, insert, update, and delete statements. Okay. Next. And if we want to test our select, again, you can only test the select statement, not the others. Okay, looks good. Finish. Okay, now if we look back, you can see that this thing's become a little more complex now. But really there's nothing unintelligible in here. You've just got a command for each thing, for each data operation, and you've got parameters for each data operation that needs a parameter. Why don't you have select parameters? Select doesn't need parameters. It's just a simple select statement, right? But any query that you see a parameter like that, you're going to have a corresponding parameter object here. Okay? Can I change these if I want to? Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, say I didn't want them to change the author's last name. I would just simply remove that out of here. And then I could get rid of, in the update parameters, I could get rid of that parameter right there, not needed anymore, okay? Could I make the update parameter update a totally different table? Yeah, I can do anything I want, okay? So this is just using the wizard kind of to speed things up for us. Okay, so now I've got that there. Now, let's go back to design view, go to the smart tag of the grid view, and choose our data source, which will be what?
Let's go data source 1.
SQL data source 1. Now watch what happens when we do that. It automatically detects the fields returned by SQL data source 1 and generates columns for each one of those fields. Okay? Now, there's a bunch of things we can do in the smart tag of the grid view. At the top, auto format, we can choose from any number of predefined formatting styles that look good to us. So, pick one that you like. I'll pick this professional one here. Say OK. And if you look in source view now, you'll see that the grid view has a number of different things in it. Most of these at the bottom deal with the style. Can you change these all individually?
Sure.
Absolutely. So you can customize this to fit your template. So if you use a grid view in your project, make it match, okay? Tweak the colors so that it matches your template. Doesn't look like this thing fell out of the sky and landed on your page, okay? Make it look like it was designed that way. Yeah.
Can you rename it some cool name like Snowy something anyway?
Snowy, like the grid view itself?
No, those styles like the professional, and can you build a new?
You could. You would do that with skins, which we're going to talk about next week. You don't really give it a name though.
You need to rename
No, actually, you can give it a name.
So disappointed.
You can. I take that back. You can give it a skin. You give it a skin ID. A skin ID. We'll see how to do
I
it.
was saying that rather sarcastically, but I just thought if you're going to use it again, it'd be nice to
Yeah,
to put it in there and use it again.
And we'll see how to do that with skins. Is there another?
You need to rename your grid view.
I do. The instructions said name it GVW authors. So I'll come and change the ID to GVW authors. Now let me point out a couple of things about the grid view, guys. Most of this stuff is, formatting stuff. 4-color grid lines. That's self-explanatory, okay? But look at a couple of these attributes. Auto-generate columns equals false. Now, notice that inside the grid view we have a section called columns.
It has the columns for the data source.
And it has the columns from the data source, okay? You can, if you choose, delete all of these and set auto-generate columns to true. What happens in that case? Then at runtime the grid view is built on the fly, okay? So you don't have to specify beforehand what all the fields or the columns
Would you
are.
do that, like if your columns or whatever are going to be changing in your database?
Yes, so there could be certain instances where you don't know beforehand exactly what columns you might get back. For example, maybe you're allowing the user to customize, right? Say, these are the fields I want to see, with checkboxes or something. So you don't know beforehand which columns you're going to be getting back. That would be a good time to set auto-generate columns to true and not define these. However, the downside for doing that is when we don't have the fields explicitly defined, we can't really customize them. Okay? We'll see how to customize. Okay, so auto-generate columns. If it's set to true, you don't need all this. If it's set to false, you do. Questions on that? Okay. I want you to mentally underline this right here. Data key names. This is an absolutely crucial piece, and I guarantee at some point, at least 5 of you will ask me why your grid view doesn't work, and it's because this will be missing, okay? The data key names. Data key names is set to AU_ID. What would you guess this means?
That's your primary key.
It's your primary key, okay? Notice that if we go back to our query in our SQL data source, notice that your update statement and your delete statement have this where clause, right? Where author ID equals author ID. Where is the grid view going to get this value?
The select statement.
Sort of, yes. Okay, here's how this looks, okay? So we're going to have a grid view. We're going to have a grid view with multiple rows and multiple columns, okay? And if we look in design view, we can see it'll kind of look like this, okay? So we'll have a column for author ID, AUID, we'll have last name, first name, and so on, okay? Now, is it mandatory that we have a column for author ID? Is it mandatory that we have any of these columns?
No.
As a matter of fact, no, it's not, right?
It just have to be attached to the ID.
So we don't have to have any of these columns. And in fact, if you think about this, guys, a lot of times you don't want to display the primary key. Agreed? You don't want users seeing your unique identifying numbers. You're not going to let them change them. So why even show them? Now, there could be exceptions. But the point is, you may not even have this column. Okay? So let's imagine it's not there. That column's not there anymore. But you still need to do updates and deletes, right? Which means you still need that author ID value. Yes?
Yes.
So where's it going to get that? The answer is it comes from the grid view's data keys collection. The data keys collection. Here's the way to think about this, okay? Imagine a parallel, and I know you, sorry guys, you probably can't see this very well. Imagine a parallel one-column list that kind of, it's invisible, you don't ever see it, but it sits next to the grid view, okay? This is called the data keys collection. Its purpose is to hold the primary keys for each of these rows. So if this is your first row, your first data row, there will also be a corresponding data key value with the author ID for that author. And if this is your second row, then there will be a corresponding data key for that author. So the data keys collection, again, is kind of this, it's not invisible, you just never see it. It's a parallel list that goes with the rows in the grid view. And its purpose is to hold the primary key values, which allows you to do updates and deletes. What happens if you don't put in, go back here, what happens if you leave out data key names?
You're not going to have the finding.
So what we've said with data key names is, the field that we want you to put in the data keys collection is author ID. If you don't have that, then this collection will be empty. The data keys collection will be empty, which means your updates won't work and your deletes won't work. Okay? Everyone all right with that? Okay. Data source ID equals SQL data source 1. That's a no-brainer, right? We've set it to the data source. So we're good. Okay, so now let me point out here, I mentioned all these bound fields. Remember, these correspond to the the columns of the grid view. By default, you get a bound field. Okay? The way to think about a bound field is it's kind of like a black box. It has all the functionality needed to display this thing you want to display all wrapped up inside of it. Okay? Which is nice, but it doesn't give you a lot of control. Doesn't let you fine-tune things, because again, it's a black box, it's all wrapped up and you can't really get inside of it. However, you can make certain changes to bound fields, and let me show you how that's done. If you go back to Design View, back to the Smart tag, go to Edit Columns. And here you can see all of the different columns that you have in the grid view, and if you select one, you can change various properties of it. For example, the header text. Now the default you'll get here are the database column names, which is usually not a good thing. One, because it's ugly. Two, because you're telling the user what your column names are. So, good idea to change these. Yeah, so we could get rid of it, right? Or, and you'll notice here already, there's a property down here called read only. And the framework is smart enough to recognize that this is the primary key, and so it sets read only to true. So this means you'll see it, but you won't be able to edit it. Okay?
There's a visible property.
There's also a visible property that you could set to false, if you'd like. Or you could simply come into author ID and delete it. Okay, so now you've just taken it out of the grid view entirely. Now, does that mean everything breaks down?
No.
As long as
You still have that.
the data key names, I can keep hammering this because over and over, semester after semester, it becomes an issue. The data key names, as long as that's set, your updates and your deletes will work. Okay, so anyway, all sorts of different things that you can do. A data format string. Okay, we'll see how to use that in just a minute. But it gives you an example here in the description. The formatting that is applied to the bound value. For example, that format string formats the column as a date. This format string formats the column as a currency. There's a table in your book, and I forget which page it's on, but I think I referred to it in the instructions. There's a table that lists all the different string formats with their corresponding codes. Okay? So if we put a code in here, and there really isn't, none of these fields really are dollar values or date values, so we really don't need to apply it here, but we could go in and add a format string here. Okay? And then there's some style elements that we can set. So there's different things that you can format and customize to some degree on a bound field, and you do that here. Okay. Okay, so let me just cancel out of this, and we also needed to go back and enable editing, deleting, and selection, right? Yeah.
Except for
For editing, selecting, paging, and sorting. Deleting, yeah, so not deleting. So paging and sorting. Okay, that's it. So once again, before we run this, just as a reality check out your code behind file. Oh no, it's there. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
nothing in combined.
No code, right? No code at all. So, makes you guys happy. You in browser? Da-da-da. So this, I mean, guys, if you have to implement something like this manually, it's a pain. It would be a huge pain to do this, okay? So with the grid view, within under 5 minutes, you can give very sophisticated data display options, okay? I thought I changed that header text for the author ID. Maybe I
didn't save it.
I
You
didn't
canceled
save
that.
it. Shame on me. Okay, so what happens when you push edit? Okay.
Can you do it from there? From the online application?
Change that, click update, okay, and the data's been updated. Now we haven't enabled deleting, okay, but you can select, and we'll explain what select does in just a minute, but selecting allows us some additional functionality. Yes?
So editing here will change what's in the data.
Yes. And why will it do that? Because we have linked this grid view to a SQL data source that is enabled with an update statement. Okay? Where is the SQL data source getting all these values for the update? Look at all these parameters. Where's it getting all those values from? It's getting it from the grid view, right? So the grid view has columns or fields that correspond to all those columns. So notice here, the data field, AUL name, that will be automatically bound to that field in the SQL data source. So grid views and SQL data sources, in fact all these data controls and SQL data sources are designed to work together very seamlessly, to the point where you really don't have to write any code at all. Okay? Yeah, it is. It's really nice. But there is a trade-off, right? Whenever we want more convenience, we sacrifice flexibility. So now we want to customize things, okay, with this grid view. So we're going to see how we can open the box a little bit and customize it. But very sophisticated functionality out of the box. By the way, what happens when you click on the columns? It sorts. Okay. So pretty nice stuff. Okay, and notice, by the way, why is this guy a checkbox?
Because it was built as a checkbox.
It's a Boolean field. It's a binary. It's a bit in the database, and so the grid view automatically recognizes that data type and gives you a checkbox. But if you come back and look at the code, so this one is not a bound field. It's a checkbox field. So there's other kinds of fields that we'll see as we go through this.
How did the read-only get set on that where it's not there?
Well, remember, okay, that's a good question. So what, back to the browser. All these are read-only in display
you
mode,
have to do edit.
right? So what do you have to do? Click edit, and then you're able to change it. Okay? Questions on that? Yes, sir.
It doesn't seem to have the option for editing in that configuration.
Did you, when you went back in here in the smart tag, did you click enable editing?
That tag isn't there.
That means you must not have an update statement in your SQL data source.
It could be that I have to reload the database in case I got an error.
Okay. So if you reconfigure the SQL data source to have an update command, and then link it again. And by the way, let me come back to this too. What happens if you make a change now to your SQL data source where it's already linked up to a grid view? Let's say, for example, you in your select statement, you only select certain fields.
You're going to have to delete this instance and delete.
You don't have to delete the instance. What you do need to do is come in here and click refresh schema. Now, remember we saw this last time. If you refresh schema, it will look at the SQL data source to see what's new, and it will reconfigure itself to match that. Which means that you will lose, suppose I rename these column names to something more user-friendly. If I refresh schema, I lose all that. Okay? So you want to be judicious in your use of refresh schema, because you'll lose any changes. Sometimes it's easier just to manually delete the fields that you want gone, or add the new fields that you want there, as opposed to just refreshing the schema. Now, we wouldn't lose much here, because I haven't really customized it. Okay. Okay, I think that's a good stopping place. We're out of time. So we'll spend some time on this. It may take us up to 3 class periods to get through this. And we've got some wiggle room at the end. So we can always bump things back if we need to. Okay? But I do want you I won't see you for another week. So spend some time looking at this and see if you can figure out some of the next steps. Okay?
It's after we sleep, after we turn things in at 11:59 tonight, right?
11:59. Yep, and I'll be around. I have a flu shot appointment at, I think it's at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to try to go a little early so I can get back. So I should be around for office hours. If you need to come in, you're more than welcome to come in and get some help.
We'll be there.
You'll be there, good.